All right, so we spoke in class about making these walls, or if you're watching this video before class begins, we will be speaking in class about making these walls, but I'm going to make a tutorial illustrating how to create each one of these walls, and I'll do it individually so that if you get stuck on a particular wall, that you can come and to YouTube and watch that particular video about that wall. But I've given you a PDF which uh, looks like this. It has all of the wall types, and as I said, the project that we're referring to is for your systems class, where one of the things that we do is calculate the heat loss for this particular building. But in this class, we're not concerned about heat loss. So this column of R values is not necessary. But also there are some components in the wall itself that are not necessary for this class. We have an outside air film and an inside air film, and that's important to the heat loss calculations, but it's not relevant to our Revit model. So we can ignore the outside air film and the inside air film on all of these walls. We're simply working with the physical components. So the first thing we're going to look at is wall number 5. And you're welcome to name that anything that you want, but I think that for purposes of this class, it's very simple if we just simply give the walls uh, numbers for names because uh, it makes it more understandable. If you're going back and trying to make a change later on for whatever reason, we have this PDF to look at to tell us what our wall types are, and we have the numbers. But you don't have to call them those numbers if you want to give them actual names. That's fine too. So let's take a look at what we have here. We have a wall that has a 1-inch rigid insulation on the outside, 3/4-inch plywood sheathing, 2x6 wood studs at 16 inches on center, 5.5 inches of fiberglass or some other type of batting insulation, a 1/2 inch gypsum wall board. I think we should really change that to 5/8, and inside air film. So if you're going to use 1/2 inch gypsum board, that's fine, but you're going to want to make sure that all of your walls have used the 1/2 inch gypsum board. But I'm going to say let's use 5/8. Either one is fine, but you want to be consistent. If you're going to build your house with 5/8 gypsum board all the way around, all of your components, you have to have the 5/8 gypsum board. The only reason that that's important is when if you have some walls that have 1/2 inch gypsum board and you have some walls that have 5/8 gypsum board, what happens is when they meet, they're not. It's not a flush connection. It's going to have a slight um, uh, change in the location of the face of the gypsum board, which is, it's not something that you can remedy. So we want to be consistent. If you're going to use 1/2 inch gypsum board, that's fine. But I'm going to switch to 5/8. So anyway, here's how we start. We know we have our tabs across the top, and we have our ribbon, which is here. And then we have our project browser and our properties box, and these are going to tell us the properties of the object that we have highlighted, and this is how we navigate around our project. So I'm in a plan level. Uh, I'm going to make a wall, so it's easiest to create a wall in a plan level uh, or a floor plan. And so I'm going to come up to the architecture tab, and then I'm going to click on the wall icon in the ribbon, uh, in the build area of the ribbon. So I click on wall and it shows me in the properties box. If I click in this box here, it shows me all of the walls that I've already made or that come preloaded from Revit. And I don't have exactly what I want, so I'm going to make a new one. So we can start with any one of these, but I'll just start with the basic generic 8-inch wall. We're going to modify it, so it really doesn't matter. It might be easier to start with another one, but we can start with this one. Or it might be more difficult to start with another one. So like I say, it doesn't matter because we're going to modify it. So simply we go to the architecture tab, then the wall icon, then we come down to this, it says basic wall 8 inches, or whichever is showing is fine. And we're simply going to edit the type. And once we edit the type, we get a new type properties dialog box. And the first thing we want to do is simply duplicate that which we already have, because we don't, if we change this particular type without making a new version of it, then we've lost that particular type. It will no longer exist. It will have the characteristics of the changes that we're about to make. So let's call it the number, which I believe was 5. And that's the name we're going to give it. And now I want to see if we can make this guy just a little bit smaller so we can actually see. I hope you can see this type properties box. That could be a problem for the video if we can't. But anyway, so now we've got the type properties. We click on the edit the structure. And now if we hit the preview button over here, we can actually see what this wall looks like. And the components in this wall are very simple. It has a structural element 8 inches thick. So what we want to do is start putting in these components. So if we simply say insert, then it's giving us another row, which allows us to make another material. So this is the exterior side. So whatever we put at the top will be on the outside, and whatever we put at the very bottom will be on the interior side or the inside of the house. So I'm going to grab this first guy and I'll just say up. And I'm putting it right at the very top. So this is the exterior side. I want my 1-inch rigid insulation. So that's going to be my row number 1 here. It's really not a structural material. It's a substrate. It's not a finish. It's not structure. So we'll call it a substrate. And when we say material, we click on that and we get this little 3 dots in a box here. And we click on that button and it'll bring up a material, an asset materials that we have to choose from. And we're just over here, I'll just type in the search box, I'll just type rigid. And let's see what comes up. Well, I have rigid insulation in my material browser. So I'll just double click on that. And that's taken that and added those characteristics to this particular material. So now my outside material is a substrate. It's not really a finished material. It's not a structural material. So I could call it a substrate. And it's a rigid insulation. And how thick is it? Well, it's 1 inch thick. So I'm going to give it that thickness, which is 1 inch. Now the next material is 3/4 inch plywood sheathing. So again, we're going to go insert. And plywood sheathing, we could call that a structural material, but it's on the outside of the house. So I'm going to, with that row highlighted, I'll just send it down 1 row. And now I can call it structure if I want to, because the plywood sheathing does create some rigidity in the it's not really a load-bearing structure, but it makes the house much stronger in the lateral loads, or it stops the house from twisting. So, okay, structure. We're going to make that plywood. So notice that when I click on this material box, the default location of the cursor is right here. So I don't have to move my mouse up there. I can simply type plywood or PLY. And let's see what comes up. Plywood sheathing. Okay. Double click on that. And now it's added the material here, plywood sheathing. How thick is it? 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to type that. I can 0.75 inches is the same as 3/4 of an inch. So now you can see, I like to look at you can view this as a plan view, or you can view it as a section. And I like to look at it in a section. So now here we have our material. This is the outside. This is the inside. So I have my rigid insulation. And then after that, I have my 3/4 inch plywood. Now I'm going to put my 2x6 wood studs. Okay, so that's another material that I'm going to put in. And I want it to be the third material. So I'll move, because I see that it's put it in between these two. I want to move it down 1. So that's going to be my third. The 2x6 wood studs are definitely structure. So I'll come over here. Now, there's a couple of things. I either make this softwood lumber or I make it air. And so for this class, we'll make it softwood lumber, but I'll explain later on why making it airspace is also appropriate. But we'll just change it to softwood lumber. So again, my mouse is defaulted over here already. I don't have to go over and click on it. It's actually waiting for me to type something in the search. So I'll just type soft and let's see what comes up. Look at that, softwood lumber. Double click on it. Now I have my softwood lumber. How thick are my 2x6 studs? Well, a 2x6 is really 1.5 inches by 5.5. So I'm going to change this dimension to 5.5. And now look at what we have. We've got our rigid insulation, our plywood sheathing, and our softwood lumber. Now, the batt insulation is in the same location as the softwood lumber. We would identify that with a detail rather than actually filling that up with softwood lumber and batt insulation. So I'm choosing to identify that as the 2x6 studs. So the batt insulation is assumed, but not involved in this construction of the wall. And then finally, we have our gypsum board, which I said I'm going to make 5/8, but if you ignore that and decide to use 1/2 inch, that's fine too. So again, insert another row. I want it to be on the inside face, which means it has to be all the way down at the bottom. I'll see that row is highlighted and I'll just say, send it down to the bottom. And now I'm going to change that to a finished material. And I'm going to come over here and click on gypsum. So I'll just type GYP and see what comes up. Gypsum wallboard, double click on it. And now I have my gypsum wallboard. I need to give it a thickness, and I'm going to give it a thickness of 5/8 instead of 1/2 inch. So 5/8 of an inch. And it gave me a problem here because if you take a look, I've typed the inch symbol twice. Once it came up by default, and then I added my own by mistake. So I'll just delete one of those. And let's take a look at the wall. Now, look at this. This is the exact 5 wall that I want to make without paying attention to the inside and outside air film, because that's for another course. It looks good to me. We see some information up here. It's a basic wall. The type, we're going to call it 5. The total thickness of that wall is 7 7/8. That Revit adds up all of these thicknesses. And then it's also giving us an R value, which I don't allow my students in the systems class to utilize. We have to make our own R values here. I don't want my students to use this number, but you could change the thermal properties of these materials to be correct with what we would put in here, and then that number would be correct. But Revit's not using our accepted. When I say our, I mean our class, my accepted R values for the materials, and then it gives it thermal mass. Now, the other thing is the core boundary. We always have to have something between the core boundaries. So if you try to delete this now, number 5, if I see I don't have the option to delete that. But if I pick on number 7 or any of these other rows, I have the option to delete it. The reason I can't delete is because it would leave nothing between the core boundaries. And essentially what the core boundaries are allowing us to dimension, for example, if we wanted to dimension to the center of the structure, then the dimension lines would snap to the midpoint of this structure here, okay? If we wanted to dimension to the center line of the entire wall, then we would want to move the core boundaries down to there. So now if we snapped on this wall when we're dimensioning, it would go to the center of that wall. I like I'm looking at this, trying to figure out what do we have here, and I think that's a mistake. So I'm going to bring the core boundary back down around my softwood lumber, and I'm going to bring this core boundary up Whoops, wrong one. Bring that back down to the softwood lumber, bring it down one, and I'm going to click on this. Now it's highlighted, and I'm going to bring that up between there. And I noticed that it looks like I have an extra one. So I've got my substrate, my rigid insulation, my plywood sheathing, my 2x6 studs, and my gypsum wallboard. So I have an extra one in here, which is good. I can show you how to get rid of that. We simply highlight the row and delete it. And then we're going to say OK. And so now I have a wall type, which we're going to call number 5, and I will say OK to that. And now when I look in my wall options, I do have a wall number 5. And down at the bottom is the most recently used. So the last thing I used was wall 5, so it's here. So if you've used the wall recently and you're looking for it, you might want to come down to the most recently used. Otherwise, you can scroll through the existing ones. We have all kinds of different types of walls here that are already made. But for this class, we really want basic wall number 5. And as we start using different walls, we'll see that the most recently used type becomes more populated with just really the most recent walls that we've used. So sometimes if you want to do it quickly, I always look quickly into the most recently used types. If I'm looking for a wall type, if it's not there, then I'll go back up and search for it. But that's our first wall number 5.